Imagine a simple weapon so devastating that enemies would rather face Roman swords than see it flying through the air. Yet most history books barely mention it compared to legionary armor or gladius blades. What if I told you Rome's greatest military innovation wasn't their famous formations or siege engines, but something so ordinary looking that enemies fatally underestimated it until it was too late? The year is 168 BCE. The dusty plains of Pydna shake with the thunder of 40,000 men ready for battle. On one side stands the mighty Macedonian phalanx in C, descendants of Alexander the Great's world-conquering army. Their 20-foot spears glint in the sun as they form an unbreakable wall of bronze and iron. King Perseus is confident. After all, this formation had crushed enemies across the known world for centuries. Across the field waits a Roman force that, on paper, should lose this fight. Yet the Roman commanders show no fear. Each legionary grips something in his right hand, something that looks, to untrained eyes, like nothing more than a simple throwing spear. When you picture Rome's military might, what comes to mind? Perfect formations, iron discipline, or the short gladius sword? But ask yourself, how did Roman soldiers even get close enough to use those swords against enemies with longer weapons and massive shields? The answer isn't what most history books focus on. While everyone talks about Roman roads and architecture, their most brilliant innovation was something far humbler. It wasn't any ordinary spear, no. The Romans called it the pilum. This wasn't just any javelin, it was one of the smartest weapons ever made. Pick one up and you'd immediately notice something strange. Unlike normal spears that feel balanced, the pilum felt front-heavy and awkward. That was no accident. The pilum had two main parts. First was a wooden shaft about 4 feet long that you held in your hand. Then came the business end, a thin iron shank, another 2 to 3 feet long, with a small, pyramid-shaped tip. This metal part was as thick as your finger and deliberately made of soft iron, not hardened steel. When you look at one up close, you'd notice something odd where the metal meets the wood. The neck was purposely made thinner, almost flimsy. If you tried to bend it with your hands, you'd be shocked at how easily it could flex. This wasn't poor craftsmanship, it was genius. Imagine yourself as a Roman soldier. You're standing in line, pilum in hand, the weight pulls forward, the metal tip eager to fly. When the command comes, you step forward with your left foot, pull back your right arm, and launch. The pilum flies through the air with a distinctive whistle that enemies came to dread. But here's where the real magic happens. When the pilum hits an enemy shield, the sharp tip punches through easily. But then, something unexpected occurs. That soft iron neck bends under the impact weight. The wooden shaft drops down, still attached to the metal point buried in the shield. Now think about this. The enemy soldier has a 7-foot spear hanging off his shield. He can't remove it quickly because of the barbed tip. He can't cut through the iron shaft. And he can't effectively use a shield with a heavy wooden pole dragging from it. The Romans didn't make weapons that just killed bodies. They made weapons that killed equipment. Most spears in history were designed to be sturdy. The pilum was deliberately designed to fail, not 1-3, but in exactly the right way and at exactly the right time. Roman blacksmiths pioneered the concept of planned obsolescence 2,000 years before modern companies. Each legion carried thousands of these ingenious weapons. Just imagine facing the first Roman volley, say, hundreds of pila, that's plural for pilum, darkening the sky, then punching through your shield line. Even if you weren't hit directly, your main protection was now worse than useless, deolé. It was a dangerous weight, pulling your arm down, right as Roman legionaries charged forward with swords drawn. The most shocking part? Even if you somehow survived and managed to collect Roman pila to throw back, you couldn't. They were single-use by design. Once bent, they were useless as throwing weapons. Some Roman generals even had the pila made with iron pins that would shear on impact, guaranteeing they couldn't be reused against their own forces. The pilum wasn't just a spear. It was psychological warfare in physical form. Let's return to that battlefield at Pydna in 168 BCE. The Macedonian phalanx was considered nearly unbeatable. Their long spears created a wall of death that had dominated battlefields for centuries. But when they faced the Romans, something shocking happened. The Roman lines stopped just outside spear range. Then came the command, "Release pila." Thousands of these weapons arced through the air. The Macedonians raised their shields, but this was exactly what the Romans wanted. Shield after shield became pinned with the bent, dangling pila. The perfect Macedonian formation fell into chaos. Gaps opened in their lines, and into those gaps charged Roman soldiers with swords drawn. What had been the strongest army in the Eastern world broke and ran. The fear was real. Imagine training your whole life to fight in formation. Your entire strategy depending on keeping your shield locked with your neighbors. Then suddenly, that shield becomes a heavy burden, dragging your arm down. You can't raise it to protect yourself. You can't throw it away because you'll be defenseless, all while Roman soldiers are charging straight at you. Panic would sweep through your lines like wildfire. The psychological effect of the pilum cannot be overstated. Enemy soldiers who survived battles against Rome would tell stories about the terrible whistling sound as hundreds of pila cut through the air. Some would surrender at just the sight of Romans preparing to throw. Over centuries, the Romans kept improving this already brilliant weapon. Early Republican pila had wooden pegs holding the metal and wooden parts together. Later, designs used iron rivets that would break on impact, making the pilum even more likely to bend. By Julius Caesar's time, some units carried lighter pila that could be thrown farther, while others had heavier versions that could punch through armor. We know all this because archaeologists have found pila at Roman battle sites across Europe. At Numantia in Spain, dozens were discovered still bent exactly as the Romans designed them to. At Alesia in France, where Caesar defeated the Gauls, pila tips were found embedded in the ground where they landed over 2,000 years ago. Julius Caesar himself wrote about their effectiveness in his book about the Gallic Wars. He noted, "Our soldiers, after discharging their javelins, attacked with sword in hand. The Gauls, though their shields were pierced and fastened together, withstood the attack of our men as long as they could." You can almost feel Caesar's pride in how his standard-issue weapons defeated the enemy before the actual hand-to-hand fighting even began. What made the pilum truly special was how it fit into Rome's entire fighting system. It wasn't just a clever weapon, it was the perfect first step in a three-part attack. First, throw pila to disable enemy shields. Next, charge forward in tight formation while enemies are struggling. Finally, use short swords for close combat against enemies who now lacked proper protection. The pilum wasn't just a weapon. It was the key that unlocked Rome's entire battle strategy. The genius of the pilum lived on long after Rome fell. The Germanic tribes who fought against Rome for centuries learned from their enemy. They created their own version called the angon. Like the pilum, it had a long iron head designed to bend after hitting a shield. When you hold one, you can feel how the design copies the Roman original but adds a few twists of its own. Later, the Eastern Roman Empire, also called the Byzantines, made an even smaller version called the plumbata. These were hand-sized darts with lead weights that soldiers could throw farther than the old pilum. Imagine the surprise of enemies who thought they were safely out of range, only to face a rain of these deadly little weapons. But the pilum's legacy goes beyond ancient times. Even today, military designers follow the same principle. Sometimes it's better to disable equipment than to kill the enemy directly. Think about modern caltrops used to puncture vehicle tires, or electronic jammers that disable enemy communications instead of attacking soldiers. These all follow the pilum's basic idea: target what protects the enemy, not just the enemy themselves. You might never have heard of the pilum before watching this video, but without it, Rome might never have built its empire. Without the pilum, Roman soldiers with their short swords would have struggled against enemies with longer spears and large shields. The pilum was the great equalizer that let Rome's infantry dominate battlefields for over 500 years. Next time you read about a famous Roman victory, remember that behind those battles was this humble weapon. Not the massive siege engines that broke city walls, not the gleaming armor of the legionaries, but a simple spear designed to bend. This makes you wonder, what other simple technologies throughout history have had huge impacts on warfare? The stirrup let mounted knights dominate Europe. The English longbow brought down armored knights at Agincourt. The humble radio transformed how armies communicated. Sometimes the simplest ideas change everything. Rome's true genius wasn't creating the most powerful weapons. Any empire could make bigger swords or stronger shields. What Rome did was create weapons that made their entire military system work better together. The pilum made their swords more effective. Their formations made the pilum more deadly. Everything worked as one perfect machine. When you think about it, maybe this is why Rome lasted so long while other empires fell. They didn't just build better walls or train better soldiers. They created better systems where each piece made all the other pieces stronger. So the next time someone tells you that Rome conquered the world through sheer force or brutal tactics, you can tell them the real story. About how a simple spear that was designed to fail in exactly the right way helped build the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen.